A witness in the life ceremony arbitration hearing has admitted to having no experience to care for mentally ill patients. Dorothy Franks told the hearing today that she had registered an Anchor House as a non-profit organization to care for mentally ill patients, despite her having no qualifications to run such institutions. Franks says she was advised by former Director of Mental Health in Gauteng, Makobo Manamela, to renovate premises at Kalafong Heights, where she was going to accommodate these patients. Franks says the patients came to her facility at the instruction of health authorities. She says the patients had no IDs or medical records. Franks says the NGO, which had no professional staff, was shut down following the death of patients at the facility.
You decided to register your own NGO?
Yes, Justice.
And you called it Anchor Center?
Yes, Justice.
And was your plan to operate separate and away from your employer of the time?
Yes, Justice.
But you had no qualifications, you've already told us,
Yes,
of taking care of mentally ill patients.
You had said that they advised you to go and look at premises. Who are these they, and when did they told you to do so?
It's, as I'm saying, I know it's in May, early May, and it was Anna Jacobus and Dr. Malamela.
Okay.
Well, let's go live now to the life ceremony arbitration proceedings.
What do you mean by ratio?
Okay, the ratio of the sicknesses that they had, mental health and severe epilepsy.
So you think they died because they didn't get the proper care they deserved, isn't it?
Because we tried our best to give them,
No, so they didn't get the care they deserved, isn't it? If they're properly cared for, like you say you've done in the past, they would not have died.
Yes.
You agree with that?
Yes, Councillor.
You do agree? You can go ahead.
Thank you, Justice. And so you've just confirmed, Mrs. Franks, that you were taking in people who you were not qualified to take in. Correct?
Yes, Councillor.
You also testified earlier that you didn't read the license and take note of its terms. Is that correct?
Yes, I just want to confirm that they brought a license to us and they said there is errors on the license and they were rectified. So this is the only license that I had before.
There were errors on the license?
Yes.
And you accepted that this license was the one you should operate by, even though you knew that there were errors?
Yeah, because they had to give us the correct license afterwards.
What errors were on the license?
Well, they just said there's errors on the licenses and they will rectify it, and even the addresses they will rectify.
Who is they, Mrs. Franks?
Okay, it's from the office of Franz and Dr. Malamela.
And so you didn't see fit to interrogate them as to what the errors were on this license?
No, they didn't say that. They just said that they will rectify it.
This was the license that was giving you authority to look after these mental health care users?
Yes, this is the license that they gave to us, to me actually.
And so you knew there were errors on it?
And we were waiting for the correct...
You knew there were errors on it?
Yes.
You didn't know what those errors were? Is that correct?
I didn't check it with them because they said they will correct it then.
And so you filed the license away?
Yes.
Can I ask you then, Mrs. Franks, what is the purpose of getting a license to operate a facility like Anchor?
To operate under the...
What's the point of the license?
To operate under the correct license details.
But you weren't operating under the correct specifications.
Because it was a mistake on their side. I'm just thinking about it.
But you knew that there was a mistake, Mrs. Franks.
Yes, and they said they were rectified and we didn't get the correct one.
But you continued to operate and to accept patients under an invalid license.
Yes, Councillor.
Okay. I'll leave that point there. Thank you.
And what's more, they paid you whilst you were acting in contravention of the law. They paid you well over R1 million while you were acting unlawfully. Do you realize that?
I realize it. Justice.
Do you realize that? Council.
Mrs. Franks, you just testified a few minutes ago that the plan was for you to go to Life Esidimeni to select the patients, to identify patients and select who you wanted to take.
Yes, that's what we ask, yes.
In my mind, and it's reflected in the Ombuds report, it brings up images almost like a market, a trade of human beings. Do you agree with me?
Sure.
Perhaps to put it differently, do you think that this method respects the patient's right to dignity?
Councillor, I really can't answer on that one.
Can I ask why you can't answer?
You know what, because this actually happened so fast. And I don't know why they did it like that.
At the moment, Mrs. Franks, I'm not asking for an explanation. I'm just asking if you think that that method of going to Life Esidimeni to identify the patients that you wanted respects their dignity.
Yes. Because, as you were saying, it respects the patient dignity.
To be almost lined up for the NGOs to come and select who they want and leave behind who they don't want.
I suggest you listen to the question carefully so you can answer it. Would you put it again, Council?
Thank you, Justice. You testified that the plan was for Anchor and other NGOs to go to Life Esidimeni and to select the patients from Life Esidimeni to take back to their NGOs.
Yes, Councillor.
So you were in effect deciding which patients you wanted and which patients you didn't want.
Yeah, then we will select according to...
And which patients would receive healthcare services and which patients you would not deliver healthcare services to.
Yes, Councillor.
Do you think that that's consistent with the patient's right to dignity?
As I concede that you will know what patient you can then help in this mental institute.
So you would know which patients would meet your criteria?
Yes, because as I say, I was actually must have 18 and upwards, and the criteria that I worked before.
Okay, I'm going to leave that there. Thank you. I'd like to then move on. We heard earlier in this arbitration from Diane Noyile, who is the CEO for Sia Badinga.
Yes, Councillor.
Do you know Diane?
Yes, Councillor.
She testified for quite a long time at the arbitration, and one of the issues that she dealt with in her testimony was that Dr. Manamela herself came to the facility. Sia Badinga at that stage was in 3 wards, that Dr. Manamela moved beds herself to condense it into 2 overcrowded wards in order to make space for Anchor.
Yes, she did that, but I didn't know why, because I don't know, was it an agreement or what? I didn't know.
Why was she so desperate to get Anchor into that facility?
I really don't know.
And working so hard to make space for the NGO that you were running?
Okay, apparently they said I must operate in 2 and she must operate in 2. And I even said I'm not going in the next one because they operate in all 3 of them.
And so to address that, Dr. Manamela herself moved beds from the 3rd one to overcrowd the 2 wards in Sia Badinga.
Yeah, that was, she discussed it with them.
So your testimony is that you were not involved in any of that at all?
No,
You just waited for 2 wards to become vacant?
that's all, yes.
And then you came in?
Yes.
Had you known her before?
Sorry?
Had you known Dr. Manamela before?
I didn't,
In other words, before December 2014,
only when
2015, sorry.
Only when we started with the meetings from,
Did you know anybody in the department before then?
yes, because I was submitting documents like Poltrina, I know.
I beg your pardon?
Poltrina, where we went to
So
the
the
region.
person at the finances you had known before,
Because I was doing the admin of
the previous one?
Yes,
And you were the finance controller there.
yes,
So you knew the finance people at the department.
yes, Council.
And Paul Trina is the one who paid you right through to February
Yes, Councillor.
2017. Yeah.
But I just submit the documents accordingly.
Yeah. Despite the formal shutdown, which is recorded by the Ombud in October 2015. Mr. Paul Trina paid you over 100,000 rand a month, even after you were shut down between October and October 2016 and February 2017. Is that right?
Yes, but the documents must be checked by Gauteng also before any payment go through.
And why did you submit claims after you had been told your operations were not up to standard and had been shut down?
Okay, because that was the agreement with the CEO that who will then pay the workers there.
If your operation is done, it is done.
Well,
If
I
it's
don't know.
shut down because it doesn't meet the measures.
That's what they agree on. And
Who are they who agreed on that?
okay, well, the CEO, Matilda Malaza, said that the workers will still be working under me, and I must pay them. So I must do the submission accordingly.
Council.
Thank you, Justice. I'm going to continue on that issue, and just to confirm, you testified that in September you received about 535,000 rand as back
Council.
pay,
Yes, Council.
and that every month you received about 150,000 rand.
Yes, Council.
Even in the period November 2016 to February 2016, when the facility was shut down.
Yes, Councillor.
And that was because you kept care workers, cleaners, nurses. You were still paying the workers.
Yes, Councillor.
So how was that money distinguished? You were still receiving the same amount every month as what you were receiving before October?
Yes, Councillor.
Before October, am I correct in saying you spent the money on care workers, cleaners, nurses, food,
Yes, Councillor.
bedding, medication, cleaning products,
Yes, Councillor. And sometimes I buy clothes for the...
and clothes?
Yes.
After the 31st of October 2017, after the shutdown of the facility, the need for these food, medication, clothes would no longer be there. Am I correct?
Yes, Councillor.
But you continued to receive the same amount.
Yes, Councillor.
Can you give us an explanation as to why that was the case, what the amount was for?
Okay, I've paid the workers every month, and if you can see all the workers' money work, I'm almost out 100,000. And if all the money that after we closed down in February, money that was over, the surplus I gave back to health department.
How much money was left over?
Sorry?
How much money was there left over?
So on the surplus,
Yes.
it was 46,000. And I don't know how much.
46,000.
46,000 some 200
Okay.
and some.
And the staff were costing you 150,000 rand per month.
Okay, the staff is almost 124.
124.
Yes.
Mrs. Franks, do you have records of your income and expenditure
Yes.
during this time?
Yes, Councillor.
Would you be prepared to make these available to the
Yes.
arbitration?
Oh, to the arbitration, because I gave it to the special investigations already.
To the Special Investigations Unit investigating the NGOs?
That's right, yes. I gave
Ma-
all my... Sorry?
My understanding, Justice, is that that doesn't preclude us from having access to those income and expenditure records. And so if you could make those available to us, Mrs. Franks, that would be,
So I must make copies of all.
please.
I'll do so.
What are SIU investigating? Did they tell you what investigations were they doing?
Yeah, they gave me a list for the finances and for reporting. There's a whole list that they gave me. Maybe I can
Yeah.
just give you the list then.
But they must have told you what were they investigating.
That's right, yes.
What did they say?
No, they just gave me the list and I have to submit each and every document to
Did
them.
they tell you what were they investigating? What
They didn't.
offense or conduct were they investigating?
They just say mostly on the finance.
Okay.
Thank you, Justice. Mrs. Franks, did you hold any funeral policies for any of the patients
No,
at Anchor?
no.
Did you hold any life insurance policies for any of
No,
them?
no. It was a short period. The period was too short before I could actually decide to do all these things.
Was your intention to take out life insurance policies?
Not at the moment.
Were you receiving any SASSA payments for any of the patients?
Yes, Councillor. Not for all of them.
How many of the patients?
I think it was 29.
29. And you had those ID documents, their ID documents for that purpose?
I gave it back to CCRC.
You've given them back to CCRC.
Yes.
When did you receive SASSA grants? What was the last date on which you received SASSA grants?
It was March.
March
When it closed down, yes.
2017.
Yes.
But your facility was shut down, according to the Ombud, on the 31st of October 2016.
Yes, I asked them to close all the SASAs in March.
So you continued receiving money for 5
For
months.
February, yes.
And what did you do with that money?
Well, I bought clothes for them. And
Mrs. Franks, this is after the facility is shut down.
yes, and I bought snacks and stuff because sometimes they said I must bring.
Who were you buying clothes and snacks for?
For the users,
After the facility shut down?
yes. And roll-on, okay,
Sorry, and?
roll-on and all this necessities.
So you continued to purchase things for mental health care
Yes.
users after the facility
Yes,
shut down?
yes.
And what
Councillor.
prompted you to stop these payments in March?
Okay, because they said I must close down in March.
They, who are they?
Mrs. Malaza, the CEO.
And where are those SASSA cards now?
It doesn't work because we close it down.
Have you still got the physical cards?
Yes.
You haven't returned them to the families?
No, I gave it to Daphne, only the IDs.
So Daphne still holds the identity documents?
That's right.
You withdrew 29 SASSA grants at how much per month?
100 and 1,500.
1,500 times 29. That's nearly 35,000 rand every month. And you bought what with it?
Okay, what they need is like a roll-on and
But why would you do
toothpaste
that?
and-
Your operation is shut down by law. You're visited by inspectors from National Health Office, and you're required to stop operating what was an unlawful operation. And you continue to be paid by the department, and you continue to take money which was meant to look after the patients.
yes,
Well,
and
why did you do that? What were you going to do with that money
okay,
of the patient?
what I can say also, the professional psychotic nurse, actually, we also pay a few rands out of SASSA because she charged us, because she was a psychotic nurse.
You take people's subsistence grant and you go and pay your employees' salaries? Is that what you said?
Yeah, for the psychotic nurse.
The
Because I
psychotic
didn't
nurse employed by whom?
by us.
But you were shut down
She was still working.
for CCRC.
No, she was still working for us.
But you are told you are unlawful. You may not operate, may not look after any patients. And you must shut down the operation.
But the workers must still work.
For whom?
And I must pay them.
Why? Why must you pay them?
Because of the,
They're working at CCRC and you pay them. Why?
they said the workers will stay and I must
They
stay.
said, who are they?
Okay,
Let's stop saying, talking
okay,
about them.
sorry, Justice. The CEO from Kalinin.
So Ms. Malaza is the one who said, continue to draw these grants
Yes,
of 29 people,
and then I must,
and then you
and
must...
all my workers must stay there and I must pay them accordingly.
But the department was also paying you for your workers.
Yes, but the payments that for certain people wasn't enough to,
You've just said that you paid enough and you were left with some money out of the 150.
yeah, on the health department,
Huh?
but on the health department records. Because they have a certain amount that you have to pay. And
Who
The
ever
nurses-
told you that SASSA grants are meant to pay salaries?
okay, not all of them, because we bought all the for the patients. We bought food and we bought
You bought food or you paid salaries?
we did everything out of the SASSA, which we can't get out of health. Health gives you a certain amount that you must use, and everything you have extra, you can pay it out of that.
Counsel, you go on.
Thank you, Justice.
Before I say something I might regret, you go ahead.
Thank you, Justice. I see that it's also 1:30, but would you be happy for me to finish this issue before
Yes,
we
I
take
think
the
I'm
adjournment?
happy for you to finish the issue and we can take the...
Thank you. Mrs. Franks, you testified that you left Anchor on the 7th of November 2016. Is that correct?
Sorry?
You testified that you left Anchor on the 7th of November 2016.
Yes.
But
Councillor.
that you continued to receive, on behalf of Anchor, the subsidies from the Department of Health
Yes.
and the
Councillor.
SASSA grants.
Yes, Councillor.
And you continued to take instructions from Mrs. Malaza as to what you should do about the payment of the nurses and about the SASSA grants.
Yes, Councillor.
You continued to do this even after you had left as the CEO of ANCA.
Yes, Councillor.
On what basis did you continue to follow instructions from the Department of Health?
Because they said I've got an agreement for a year.
Who was they, Mrs. Franks?
Okay, according to health, I've got an agreement from 30 April to March to continue with the work until my contract ended.
But were you not only supposed to be paid when you were looking after patients?
But the workers was all there to look after the patients.
What were the workers doing?
They were looking after the patients.
But there were no patients there. I'm just struggling to understand, Mrs. Franks, if the facility was closed on the 31st of October, were patients there staying in an unlawful facility, or were there no patients and staff there essentially doing nothing?
Okay, what happened? The patients was there and the workers.
And so the facility was shut down on the 31st of October.
They just said I must leave the premises, but the patients will stay there and the workers will stay there.
So you left the premises on the 7th of November?
Yes.
But you still continued to run the facility remotely?
That's right.
Okay. I think I'll leave it there if you're happy to, Justice, and we can return after lunch.
I'm not happy at all. But we're certainly going to adjourn. I'll try to teach you a few things in indigenous language, and you're not doing badly, Council. So we're going to adjourn now, and you might get an interpreter for a few cents to tell you what I just said, okay?
I'll look around for one. Thank you, Justice.
We adjourn till 2:30.
The life ceremony arbitration proceedings adjourning for an hour for lunch. They will reconvene at 2:30. Before that adjournment